Hey, welcome to Branch's online worship. We're in a series called 7 Life Lessons, where every week we're looking at one truth that will transform your life. We're so glad that you're joining us wherever you are on your spiritual journey, wherever you are in the world. We hope that this will be an encouragement to you. If you're with us every week, welcome back. And if this is your first time logging in, welcome. We're especially glad that you're here. We'd love to hear from every one of you. Would you take a moment to fill out the online connection card before you log off? We're about to jump into this series, which is just a continuation of our study of the book of Matthew. So if you have your Bibles or if you have your Matthew journals, get them out. We're somewhere in Matthew's chapter 14 through 16, where Jesus teaches these powerful lessons. My name is Josh. I'm one of the pastors at Branch Life Church. And again, we're glad that you've joined us today. If you'd like more information about Branch Life, if you'd like to give online, if you'd like to find more shareable resources, you can find all of that at branchlife.church. And we'd love to connect with you more there. And if this message is helpful to you today, don't forget to share it with your friends on social media. Hey, grab your Bibles, grab your Matthew journals. Let's dive into today's life lesson.
Remember the life lessons your dad taught you. Dads teach the best life lessons.
I remember the first of many life lessons my dad taught me by making paper airplanes. He taught me how to fold and measure the paper so it was sure. That was amazing. I learned so much.
Our Heavenly Father also teaches life lessons. He said, "For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it."
All right, guys, if this is your first time with us and you have not yet gotten a free Matthew journal, we'd love for you to have one of these. Grab one of these on your way out. This is our gift to you. If you're able to return with us, we're going through Matthew all this year and through the beginning of next year. You can use this to follow along, to mark up and take notes in. If you're not able to return, this is a gift for you to use at home as you want to dive into the book of Matthew together. We're going to be in life lesson number 3, which comes out of Matthew chapter 15. So in our journals, it is page 82, and Matthew chapter 15 in your Bibles. You can just go ahead and go there now, and we'll jump into this. Now, as you prepare for the pop quiz, life lesson number 1 was, I don't hear anybody shouting it out, so I'll just give you the answer. Life lesson number 1 is safety is not guaranteed. So we had an incredible discussion about that, and sometimes people think as Christians life is supposed to be easy and problem-free. That is not the guarantee that God gives. Compassion and satisfaction are guaranteed. Life lesson number 2, a little faith goes a long way. And God does some extraordinary things with ordinary people who have just a little bit of faith. That was the discussion the last 2 weeks. If you want to catch those, you can go to our YouTube channel or our website anytime. Today we're in life lesson number 3. And life lesson number 3 actually connects to a trend that's going on right now. And Jesus was way ahead of his time with setting trends. If you are on social media at all, first of all, I apologize. Man, that's a hard place to be, is social media nowadays. But we're all there in some way, shape, or form. And on social media, the last couple weeks, there's been a trend or a hashtag called the red flag hashtag. Have you seen this red flag hashtag? So what happens is if you hear a statement from someone and it's red flag worthy, which means caution, beware, then they'll say the statement and there'll be a bunch of red flag emojis on it, right? And so if you're out on a date with somebody and you ask them how they're doing and where they live, and they go, "Oh, I'm 30 years old and I live in my parents' basement," red flag, right? So there's a lot of red flags that'll come over there. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? I want to be a gamer when red flag, okay? So that's what this trend is. And so it's happening all over social media right now. And so some corporations are getting into this. They want you to beware of certain statements. The Dr. Pepper company wants you to beware if someone says, "No, we don't have any Dr. Pepper." Bunch of red flags, right? All the Dr. Pepper fans said, amen. Okay, Crocs company said, "I am not a Crocs person." Red flag. I don't know how I feel about Crocs. I'm kind of on the fence with the whole Croc situation. I actually saw an alligator with a croc in their mouth online this week, and it blew my mind. The Houston Texans said if someone says Texas barbecue is just okay, 3 lines of red flags, right? So just Texas barbecue is the best barbecue out there. Amen? Yeah, okay. And then people are like, I don't even like barbecue. Hot Pocket said if I've never had a Hot Pocket, that's a red flag. So this is the trend that's going on right now, is you see these red flags all over. You'll see people highlighting statements, highlighting claims, highlighting truths, and then if you think you should beware, red flag it. Now, what Jesus gives us today in life lesson number 3 is a red flag warning. He's giving us a warning. He's telling us to have caution. He's telling us to beware. And here's the life lesson for today. Beware of blind leaders. Beware of blind leaders. Specifically, beware of blind spiritual leaders. Here's the verse that it comes from in Matthew chapter 15, right in the middle of the chapter. If the blind lead the blind, then both will fall into a pit. Now, here's the question that I have this morning as we kick off into this topic. There's a lot of interesting topics that come up in Matthew chapter 15, but all of them are packaged with this warning around them. And so it keeps coming back to this idea that we have to beware of blind leaders. Is this a warning or a caution that we need today in 2021 in the greater Philadelphia area in the United States of America? Is this something that we need to be cautious of and to be concerned about? Let me give you a couple of numbers. In Pennsylvania, 8% of the people who live in Pennsylvania claim to be born-again Christians. 8%. 80% of people were not in a church or a synagogue or a worship center or a temple last Sunday, and that's a pre-pandemic number. Now, no matter if you're a follower of Jesus or not, what that tells you is there are a lot of people in our area that believe different things. In other words, there are a lot of people that are following leaders, and there's all kinds of leaders that you can follow out there. There's all kinds of religions that people are a part of, whether there's Jehovah's Witnesses or Scientologists or Muslims or Catholics or whatever. They're all out there. There's all kinds of leaders that people follow politically. There's all kinds of leaders that people get their information from, and they take that information as truth. There's counselors and psychologists that are out there that are leading people and directing people. There's mystics that are claiming to have information from the great beyond that are giving you advice. There's people that you can call on hotlines, on phone numbers. You can get your future and your fortune told. You can follow tarot card readers and get advice from them. And people are following these people as their spiritual leaders. In America today, that's happening. Now, if you go around the world, if you go to a village in Africa, you might find a shaman who would be your spiritual leader, or a witch doctor who would be your spiritual leader. You might find someone that looks to the stars, and they study the stars, and they get messages from the stars, and they instruct you on what you should do and how you should live. All around the world, people are following all kinds of spiritual leaders, and everybody's all over the map. So how do you know which leaders to follow? How do you know which religions, which networks, which gurus to listen to? How do you know that they have the right answers versus somebody else who has a different set of answers? Now, add onto it technology. Welcome to the greatest information age ever. Now you can go onto YouTube and you have all kinds of people giving you direction in your life. There are influencers out there who simply want to direct you and tell you what to think and how to think and what to believe. There are preachers that you can pick up from all over the globe today. If you wanted to listen to 1 million sermons, 1 million teachers, you could do it in this moment. There's master classes that you can take and be a part of. And everybody across the board is claiming to have the truth. Everybody is saying that you should follow them, that you should follow their lead. And what do we do? How do we explain that if I go out into the grocery store today and I talk to 20 people about who they're following, you'll get 20 different answers? Is everybody right? That's one of the ways our culture has tried to explain this challenge. If there's 20 different beliefs, then that means there's just 20 different ways to get to the same end result. That's called postmodernism. The problem with that is it claims that people are right even when they're wrong. So what's the danger? The danger is that you'll start following somebody who's wrong, who's blind. And we may need this morning now more than ever. So what Jesus does is he gives us red flags for blind leaders. Here's some warning signs that you need to know about and you need to think about as you are following people, as you are measuring people, as you're trying to think about, is this someone, something, some organization that I should follow? Because what if my pastor, what if my minister, what if my rabbi, what if my counselor, what if my mystic is wrong and is blind? That's the danger that we all face. So let's go to Matthew chapter 15, and let's start reading in verse 1. We'll read through these first 10 verses, and let's see if you can pick out the 3 red flag warnings as we go along. So after Jesus has walked on water, he's fed the 5,000, his friend had died, all kinds of big things had happened. He was pretty established. He was getting a pretty good following. And the religious leaders of those days were called the scribes and the Pharisees. They were kind of the leaders, the religious leaders in that moment. Then the Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders?" Now, let me just kind of set this up for a minute. This is probably how it went. These men probably came out from Jerusalem. They came up to Jesus and they said, "Now, why do your disciples break the traditions that we have set up?" Like, they weren't like, "Hey, Jesus, I'm really kind of wondering. Could you help me out here? Because I'm stumped. I'm confused." No. They were coming at Jesus, and they were accusing him, and they were standing on their high horse and looking down at him. I don't know how they stayed balanced on their horses. And they said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat." And everybody in 2021 went, "What? You mean they didn't sing happy birthday and wash their hands for 30 seconds? They could catch the virus." I think this is a really big deal. Like, they actually had hand washing as a thing back in, I told you there was trend setting going on back in the Bible times. Like, this was a big deal. And there was this religious kind of addition to the Old Testament that the scribes and Pharisees had added. And they're like, you have to wash your hands before you partake for cleanliness, but for religious ritual, and it's nowhere to be found in the Bible. But they're putting this out there. It's kind of like saying you have to pray before you eat at your meals, or your meal's not blessed. Wait, is that a thing? Well, apparently we think it is, because I get yelled at every time I eat and I don't pray. People are like, "Oh, you're going to choke on that and die." I'm like, "I'm sorry. I thought Jesus said pray continually, so I just kind of do it all the time, not just before the meals." So they had taken a practice, and they were like saying and they're coming at Jesus. Now, here's how Jesus responds to this in verse 3. And listen, this is a fascinating response. He answered them and said, "And why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition?" He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain their accusation. He actually brought to them a worse accusation. You guys are accusing me of doing this when you do something far worse. If Jesus was a Halo player, he'd be a sniper, because this was a headshot. Like, he was going at them aggressively in that moment. Yeah, that was a video game reference. He was going at them aggressively in this moment in time, and he just went all in. Jesus did this over and over and over again with bad religious leaders. He didn't coddle them. He didn't baby them. He just kind of did the smackdown. And he had very little tolerance for people who were blind leaders, who were claiming to be religious, who were claiming to be of God, and they weren't. And so in this moment, he says to them, "Why do you break God's command for the sake of your tradition?" Verse 4, "For God commanded, honor your father and mother." All right, that's a big one. That's in the 10 Commandments. Anyone know which commandment it is? Number 5. Go home and read the 10 Commandments. So commandment number 5, honor your father and mother. It's the first commandment with promise, right? He's not laying out some subtle law in the Old Testament. He's saying God said, honor your father and mother. And it went farther, whoever doesn't honor their father and mother must surely die. In the Old Testament, if you disrespected your parents, you could have been stoned to death. How about that, teenagers? Don't lip off to mom or dad. Don't not clean the room when they told you to. Don't sneak out after curfew, right? Actually honor them and respect them. If not, you would die. So that means if parents want a candy tax tonight, you've got to be okay with that. Like, you've got to give them the candy tax. And whatever percent they say, whether it's 5% of your candy, 10% of your candy, or 50% of your candy, you've got to honor your parents tonight. It's in the Bible. I'm laying groundwork for this evening's discussions that I'll be having with my kids after our time together. We have over 400 families in our neighborhood, and so it's going to be candy fest this evening. And if you need a place to go, come over to our house. It's going to be fun. So for the sake of your traditions, right, honor your parents. Now, here's what they would do instead of following God's commandments. Verse 5, but you say, if one tells his father or his mother, what you would have gained from me, I have given to God. He need not then honor his father. So for the sake of your tradition, you have made void the word of God. So in this commandment, and listen, this holds true for us today. We need to honor our parents even in their old age. We have to take care of our elderly parents. Like, that's important. That's required. There's a million ways for us to do that and do that well now in our culture. But in this moment, people were not taking care of their parents. Instead, they were giving their money to God to do something in the church and were being encouraged by the religious leaders to do that. And then they could turn around to their parents and say, sorry, I can't take care of you. I've done something more important with my money than take care of you. And God's saying, that is not what I told you to do. And so he holds up that tradition and he says then in verse 7, you hypocrites. Well did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, these people honor me with their lips, but with their hearts they're far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commands of men. So, in this warning, what are the 3 red flags that come up for blind leaders? Let me show them to you. Red flag number 1, if they are never wrong. Red flag number 2, if they value rituals over relationships. And red flag number 3, they love man's word above God's word. How do you tell a blind leader? How do you tell that that is not someone that you should listen to or that's not someone you follow? Here's 3 red flags that Jesus says you're supposed to look for. So let's just take them one at a time. Red flag number 1, if they are never wrong. Have you ever met someone who's never wrong? Like, here's what happened in verses 1 and 2. These religious leaders came up to Jesus and they assumed, they proposed, they had the mindset that they were right and Jesus was wrong. They had already made that decision and there was no way that Jesus or anybody was going to talk them out of it. They're coming up making the accusation that I'm on the high ground and you're on the low ground. They were making the pre-assumption that we're not wrong, they are. And they were carrying a hallmark of a blind leader because blind leaders often think they're right, even when they're wrong. And we've got to watch out for people that say, I'm right and you're wrong. Have you ever met people like that? Have you ever seen it? It happens in all kinds of realms. Probably the most famous place that we see it all the time is in political conversations, right? Where political people come to the table and their position is their position and their position is their position, and there's nothing that you can say that's ever going to change the other one because they've already determined that they are right and you are wrong. And there's no talking them out of it. And have you ever seen this happen in religious discussions? Have you ever seen this happen in education, right? Where the professor or the principal has the higher ground? I love it when parents come into a classroom and they have this assumed position that the parent is right and the teacher's already wrong, and they don't even know what the teacher has been doing. I'm standing up for teachers in this moment, right? And the parents come in and say, my daughter told me this, and my daughter never says anything that's not true. And that you must have been something weird and awful and bad, and here I am to come get you because I'm right and you're wrong. And we often presuppose that we're right and we're wrong. Have you ever seen this happen in a marriage? It often ends with, I told you so. I told you so, and I knew I was right, and I was right the whole time, and it just is a matter of time until you prove me right, and now I'm right because I'm always right, and I'm never wrong. And it's hard to be married to someone who's never wrong. Parents, do we do this with our kids? I'm the parent, you're the child, therefore I'm always right and you're always wrong. That's a tough position to take with your kids. I've had my kids absolutely work as hard as they possibly can to convince me that the sky was purple and not blue. I know what blue looks like. I'm the father. You're the child. And if they're wrong about the color of the sky, they're going to be wrong about everything else. Amen? And then as a parent, I've got to come into this discussion not always thinking I'm right. Listen, blind leaders come in with this presupposition that they're always right, even when they're wrong, and it happens to all of us. And Jesus says, hey, we have to beware of blind leaders. So here, let me give you a piece of advice, because here's what's absolutely true. There is no leader that is right 100% of the time. There is no leader, save Jesus, who is 100% of the time 100% right. Every leader gets it wrong at some point. Every leader makes a mistake. Every leader has a misunderstanding or has a miscommunication. The leaders that you want to follow are leaders that recognize the fact that, yes, they can be wrong. Yes, they can make mistakes. Yes, they might not have all the information or have the total corner on the market. Those are the leaders that you want to follow, the leaders that admit their mistakes. Parents, sometimes we're wrong, and yes, we should admit that we're wrong. Spouses, sometimes we're wrong, and yes, we should admit that we're wrong. Parents to teachers, sometimes we're wrong and the teachers are right, and we need to admit that we're wrong sometimes. Yes, even in politics, sometimes I'm wrong and they're right. We have to take this position that we're not always right all the time. Nobody is. So it's a red flag when somebody thinks they're right all the time. Here's two things you need to do. Number one, have humility. Have humility. And here's why you need to have humility, because you might be wrong. Whenever you make a point, whenever you're in a discussion, whenever you're in a debate, have a healthy amount of humility in that debate and recognize that even though you think you're right, even though you are pretty convinced and you're pretty sure that there is a possibility that you might be wrong, and therefore you listen to the point or the counterpoint with humility. You don't attack and go after and stand in this aggressive, pious place, but in humility stand firmly on the ground the best that you possibly can. And number two, have grace, because they might be wrong. Have grace because they might be wrong. And so many times we go after people that are wrong in a horrible way. And we, if we are right and they were wrong, have to be able to stand up in a place that, yes, I might be wrong and you might be wrong, but I'm going to cover this conversation with grace no matter what. I've seen preachers, I've seen teachers, I've seen pastors who have said great things week after week after week. Teachers who have taught kids well in an amazing way week after week after week, and they make one false statement. They misinterpret something. They get something wrong, and all of a sudden, everybody just crams after them. And they basically crucify that person for one mistake. Have a little grace. Everybody makes mistakes. Try to be more understanding and more compassionate when someone else makes a mistake, someone else makes a misstep. Then by God's grace, it could be you. So, red flag when someone's always wrong. Never wrong, Red flag number two. It would be a red flag if they're always wrong too. That would just take that one. But red flag number two, if they value ritual over relationship. In chapter 15, in verses 3 through 6, Jesus says, "Why do you disobey the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition?" That's in verse 3. And then through verses 4 and 5, he explains this command and how people are breaking the command because of the traditions that they have. Now here's how that gets summed up. In their pursuit of God, these religious leaders were putting ritual over their relationship. They were putting tradition over their relationship with God. And before we get too judgy on these scribes and Pharisees, here's the interesting thing about ritual. Here's why ritual and tradition is so popular. Because ritual is comforting. Ritual is satisfying. Ritual is secure. Ritual is safe. Ritual is known. And I can go through these rituals and I can go through these traditions, and they bring me a sense of peace and consistency in my life. And then what happens as we have this comfortable enjoyable ritual that we're a part of over and over again is that we can start depending on that ritual instead of depending on the relationship. And just like my mother-in-law says, people are more important than things. Your relationship with God and people are more important than your rituals. Blind leaders forget that. And they start fighting for rituals instead of acknowledging God or people. You see, God said, love me with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. But if my neighbor comes in and tries to change my tradition, if they interrupt my ritual, I'm going to be all kinds of angry at them and upset with them because they're taking away my comfort and my peace and my rituals. But you are now attacking a person and you're putting a ritual over that relationship. That's where blind leaders start to get things wrong. And we all can get into this danger of starting to love our rituals. I'm getting very excited about Christmas Eve because it's going to be our first Christmas Eve here in this building as Branch Life Church and on this worship center. We're going to have those 3 Christmas Eve services. They're going to be candlelight services to go with our Christmas lights theme. We're going to point people to Jesus, and I've already heard it probably 10 or 15 times. We have to have a candlelight service at the end, and we have to sing Silent Night. Why? Because that's how we've always done it. And I'm like, what? We've never done it before. This is our first Christmas Eve service. Like, we have no rituals. But that's how we've always done it, and that's what's special to our family. And listen, I get it. I've done it that way a million times myself. We're totally going to do candlelight service with Silent Night. Like, that's totally what we're going to do. But here's the danger, that we have to do it that way now every year. Why? Because that ritual becomes important. And if we don't do the ritual, then it doesn't count. And God's not glorified, and it wasn't special. No. Our rituals don't overtake our relationship. We don't want to ever get into the rut of doing the same thing over and over again, that we decrease the value and recognition that we are doing these things because our relationship with God matters. On this Christmas, God himself was born. The light of the earth came to this planet so that we could be saved. And we're gathering on Christmas Eve to celebrate that and to spread the good news about that. And it literally doesn't matter how we do it. It matters that we do it for the glory of God. And so we're going to use candlelight. We're going to use songs. We're going to use carols. We're going to use decorations to glorify our God who's in heaven. And those things are a means to an end. They are not the end themselves. Be careful of liturgy. Be careful of rote, repeated behavior. Be careful of tradition. Don't ever raise that over the relationship that you have with Jesus. The same thing can happen with the worship songs we sing on Sunday. It can be why we gather together on Sunday mornings. People can do it just because we've always done it. Why are you here? Because you've always come here? Or because this is where you meet together with the family of God to worship Jesus? The third red flag is if they love man's word over God's. In that prophecy from Isaiah in verses 7, 8, and 9, it says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine the commandments of men." Here's the last danger. Here's the last red flag. When somebody takes the doctrines of men or the teachings of man and they raise them to the level of being as authoritative as God. Doctrine in this sentence is simply meaning absolute truth. And they're presenting as absolute truth the teachings of man. Listen, there's no man that does all things right. There's no theologian, there's no system or school of thought, there's no systematic theology book that has everything absolutely 100% right. There is one teacher, there is one doctrine maker, there is one theologian that gets it all right, and that is Jesus. And when we start promoting people, and we start promoting philosophers, and we start promoting religious leaders as the end-all, then we're raising them above Christ. We are now following a blind leader. You should never, and I say never, take what I say and trust it. You shouldn't take what I say at face value. You shouldn't take for granted because Josh said it, it must be true. As soon as you do that, you have the potential of falling into a trap. of following a blind leader. You should take everything that I say as a suggestion and as a possibility, and you should run it through the lens of Scripture. You should see if it matches up and is actually what is being taught by God and by Jesus Christ. If I asked you today, do you believe in the Trinity, in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, all being one? Do you believe in the doctrine of the Trinity? Most of us in here would probably say, absolutely, I believe in the doctrine of Trinity. And if I said, why do you believe in the doctrine of Trinity? And you say, because Josh said so, we'd have a problem. If you said, because my parents said so, we have a problem. If you said, because my pastor says so, we have a problem. Because my priest says so, we have a problem. No, can you point to Scripture? Can you demonstrate out of the Word of God why you believe in the Trinity? Not a deep theological discourse, but just a regular understanding. It shows up here in this place. And that's why I believe it, not because some teacher taught it. Why do you believe that Jesus rose again from the dead? Why do you believe that the Bible is the actual Word of God? Why do you believe that God exists and is real? Can you demonstrate it from the lens of God's teaching, or are you depending on a man? If you're depending on a man, you're in danger of raising the commands of men above the commands of God. So, blind leaders have these 3 red flags that we have to all be careful of. But thankfully, this chapter doesn't just leave it there. As we go into the next couple of chapters, the next couple of verses, it answers the question, what should we do? This is the green flags. This is the thing that we should run towards and be excited about and say, all clear, let's go for it. Here's how we handle making understanding what's being taught and who we follow in our spiritual lives. So Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 20 says this, and he, Jesus, called the people to him. Underline, called the people to him. And he said to them, circle this, hear and understand. Verse 11, a mini parable. It's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person. Then the disciples came to him and said, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard you say this? He answered, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. Let them alone. They are blind guides. And if blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit. But Peter said to him, explain the parable to us. And he said, are you still without understanding? Circle understanding. Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and then is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart. Circle heart, bonus points if you use a hearty circle. And this defiles a person, for out of the, circle heart, comes the evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, and slander. These are what defile a person, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone. So what do we do as we navigate the treacherous terrain of blind leaders? First, make Jesus both your instructor and your director. Make Jesus both your instructor and your director. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 10, he says, Jesus called the people to him. In the midst of all these blind leaders that were out there, Jesus said, come to me. And so Jesus has to be the cornerstone of our understanding of everything that is true spiritually, of everything that is truth in this world. It all centers around the person of Jesus. My faith is centered around the person of Jesus. And let me explain this. There's a movement or a discussion, it's not new, called deconstruction, where people, we just did a class on this for 6 weeks, people who grew up in a religious system deconstruct their beliefs and they reconstruct a new belief, a similar belief, or have no belief at all. They have questions about what they've been taught. They never made their faith their own, or they were believing in things on a certain level, and then when that got challenged, their faith falls apart. There's all kinds of YouTube people and personalities that teach people how to deconstruct. They have these kinds of conversations. And so in this season of deconstruction, teenagers, young adults can start following these deconstruction leaders, and I would even argue blind leaders. They can start following them, and their faith then falls apart. My faith is found on the person and work of Jesus. And here's the issue, not with everybody, but with most people that deconstruct. Their foundation of faith is upside down. You see, I believe first that God exists. I believe that God exists because it's plain. If there's a building, there has to be a builder. If there's a painting, there has to be a painter. If there's a creature, there has to be a creator. And so God exists, and if God exists, how did God make himself known? Is it possible that he made himself known in the person of Jesus Christ? There was a prophecy about a coming Messiah that would do miraculous acts. Then this person came who claimed to be that Messiah, who did miraculous acts, and he fulfilled all the prophecies. That's crazy. What are the chances of that? Well, that happened with Jesus. Then, here's the kicker, that Jesus rose again from the dead. And I believe that he did that for a billion reasons that we'll go into around Easter time. And Jesus rose again from the dead. And if Jesus actually rose again from the dead, then everything that Jesus said has to be true. And Jesus is the one that said the Bible is the Word of God. So now God exists. Jesus rose from the dead. Now I believe the Bible. The Bible then gives me instructions for how to think and how to live. Now I have a theology. And that theology informs my choices. It informs my reactions to the issues of this world. I apply that truth now in every area of my life. That's the top of the pyramid. So many people have turned their actions and the way they live in this world and even put the Bible before their relationship with Jesus. And when their worldview gets demolished or attacked, it falls apart. And then all of a sudden, they don't even know if they believe in God. Jesus becomes the foundation for everything that I believe. That's why it's a big deal when Jesus says, "Come to me. Come to me. Come to me, all you who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He gives you faith. He gives you peace. He gives you knowledge. He gives you understanding. It all starts with the person of Jesus. And then you make Jesus both your instructor and your director. Instructors are great teachers. How many of you had great teachers in your life? They gave you, now you know how to spell everything just right. Or you have this passion for history, or science is your jam, right? Why? Because that teacher was the best science teacher ever. And they just give you this incredible amount of information. Those are great teachers, and Jesus is the greatest of all teachers. He gives us all kinds of incredible information. He's the greatest of all preachers. He gives us all kinds of truth and all kinds of facts and all kinds of stuff that we can know and understand in our lives. And so we make Jesus our instructor, but we have to not stop there. You see, the Bible says that we should, yes, hear Jesus' instruction, but we should also understand him. And understanding Jesus is making him not only our instructor, but our director. I did a lot of plays in college. Because more than any preaching class, learning how to act on stage and express myself helped me do what I'm doing right now better. And so I loved being in those plays. I loved experiencing that, and I really got into it in college. One of my favorites was a death scene that I had in a murder mystery, and there was a knife sticking out of my back, and there was a blind girl that had to feel the knife. Anyway, it was amazing. Now, the way that worked out was we all followed our director. And directors, do you know what directors do? Directors instruct the actors about where they actually have to step and walk, where they sit down, when they sit down, where they stand, when they stand, how fast they walk, how slow they go, how loud they are, how quiet they are in a moment, whether they're angry or sad or mad. It's called blocking, and they block out the scenes. And then the directors say when the lights are on or when they're out, when the curtain's open or when the curtain's closed. That's the director. He's directing everything that we do in that entire play. When you make Jesus your director, he now instructs you to do everything that you do in your day and your life. He tells you where to go and how to talk and when to stand and when to sit down, when the light should come up and when the light should go down, how to rest and how to give. All of that comes through making Jesus your director in life. In James, the brother of Jesus, puts it this way. In James chapter 1 and verse 23, he says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourself. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and he's not a doer, he is a man that looks intently at his natural face in the mirror and then forgets what he looks like. But the one who looks at the perfect law, the law of liberty, perseveres, being not a hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts. He will be blessed in what he's doing. There are so many blind leaders and blind followers out there who say they believe the words of God, but they don't do what it says. Red flag. When we follow God, when we make him our instructor and our director, we do what he tells us to do. The second thing that we're supposed to do out of this passage when it comes to blind leaders is we're supposed to leave blind leaders alone. In Matthew chapter 13 and 15, Peter was real upset because these Pharisees were mad at Jesus for saying the mini parable. And what does Jesus say? Jesus says, if they're not rooted in me, they're going to be uprooted. Leave them alone. He literally says, just let them go. What should I do with blind leaders? Number one, you should not follow them. Don't follow blind leaders. Don't be in their influence. Don't digest their information. They are blind. Let them alone. And the second thing, and this is probably a little bit more apropos to those of us who follow Jesus, is we should not waste our time on them. We shouldn't waste our time on them. We cannot go around correcting every blind leader in this world. We can't go through every argument and unpack everyone's false accusations and false teaching. We can't go around correcting every bad church and every bad counselor and every bad pastor and every bad tweet and every bad post online. You can't do it. You'll just be exhausted. So don't waste your time on blind leaders. Your best defense is a good offense. In other words, promote what is true. Promote what is good, what is praiseworthy, and what is excellent. And let your lives, let your words, let your instruction, let your Facebook posts and your TikTok dances, let them all demonstrate who God is and what the truth is. And when you see someone that's in error, instead of putting them on blast, just represent the truth. Represent it well. Don't waste your time on the person that's in error. So, the way that I kind of handle this as a pastor is if there's like this trend to like correct some bad theology or some bad teaching or something from a blind leader, maybe one of these TV preachers or pastors or someone who's gone viral on the internet, there's a lot of whims and winds and waves that come up. Instead of naming that name and identifying that issue and showing you what they did that's wrong, sometimes I'll just post or I'll just preach the truth. I'll say what I believe and why I believe it and where it comes from. Probably won't even mention a name or a place. I'll just represent that truth in the best way that I know how to represent it, humbly and graciously. And then that truth becomes our defense. And in that way, we follow Jesus and we represent what we are for, not who we are against. And Jesus said, hey, just leave them alone. Let me just tell you what's true. I'm going to tell you what's true. And that's where we're going to focus on. And that's exactly what Jesus did. So here's the third thing that we do. We give Jesus our heart. We give Jesus our heart. Now, this might be the most important point of this entire section. This might be the reason that this whole thing is here. And so I really wrestled with how to word this point, this principle. And I landed on a very cliche phrase, give Jesus your heart. And I wish there was a better way to say it. I thought about saying we need to fall madly in love with Jesus because that's what this represents. Maybe there is a way to say to be passionate about God and to love Him more than anything else. You see, Jesus says that the heart is the issue. In Matthew chapter 15 and 11 through 20, He goes on and explains the parable. It's not what goes in your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out. And then He says in the verse, what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart. And this is what makes a person. Your heart is the thing that matters most. And your heart, according to Jeremiah 17:9, is desperately wicked. Your heart is so easily deceived. Who can know it? In Isaiah chapter 64:6, it says, your best work, the most righteous thing you could ever do, the most generous thing you could ever give, is like a filthy rag to God. Our hearts are the issue. So Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your what? Heart. You see, what Jesus is saying and how we understand truth is we simply give Jesus our hearts. Now, I want to suggest that we change some of our Christian terminology when it comes to the heart. Even Tate said it, and we all have in his video. He said, when I accepted Jesus, I asked Jesus into my heart. And I'm going to suggest to us today that we stop saying that phrase, asking Jesus into our heart. Asking Jesus into our heart is kind of like asking your best friend or your boss into your teenager's bedroom. It's filthy. You don't want anyone to see what's in there. And when we say or we imply that Jesus is going to come into our heart, what we can do is dangerously, we can start saying to ourselves that I'm going to make Jesus a part of what I already am doing. And I have my life, and I have the way I live, and I have my family, and I have my rituals, and I have my secrets, and I have my sins. And yes, I kind of believe what you're saying about Jesus, so I'm going to take Jesus, and Jesus, I want you to come into my heart, and I want you to hang out with all my other stuff. Nowhere in the Bible does it imply that we are supposed to add Jesus to our lives. But what the Bible teaches about the heart is that when we believe in Jesus, when we know that He died for our sins, that we are hopelessly wicked and there's nothing that we can do about it, when we see that He came and He died on the cross for our sins and that He rose again from the dead, absolutely changing everything, and He sacrificed Himself for me, when I see that, when I understand that, when I take that to heart and I look at my heart situation, my natural reaction shouldn't be say, Jesus, come to me. My natural reaction is say, Jesus, now I want to give you my heart. I want you to have it. I want you to take it. I want you to do something with it that I could never do. I am now taking what is mine and I am giving it over completely to you. When you become a follower of Jesus, when you are born again, Jesus doesn't come into your old heart. He gives you a brand new one. Jesus then takes your heart and totally transforms it. I'm not keeping any part of this for myself. I want everything to go to you. When you get saved, when you become a follower of Jesus, when you make that decision, that's the action that you're taking. You're giving Jesus your heart, and then you are in love with Him. Isn't it weird that we say we love a man who was alive over 2,000 years ago? Isn't that kind of strange? Like, doesn't that make us kind of odd and funny? Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It's super strange. If He was just a man. But if Jesus was God in flesh, if He loved you so much that He died for you, if He was God represented on earth, and He gave His life for you, a sacrificial life of a death on the cross, and then He rose again, proving that it was true, and now He's sitting on the right hand of God in heaven, caring about you, and He's offering you the free gift of salvation. He wants you to have life abundant and life more eternal. If that's what Jesus is doing right now, then I have to be in love with this man who was alive 2,000 years ago. Because He's God. He's God in flesh. If you haven't yet given Jesus your heart, stop following blind leaders. Don't be a part of meaningless religion. Don't give yourself over to the mystics and the counselors and the gurus of this world. Give yourself over to Jesus. Maybe you're following theologians. Maybe you're following theological systems and networks of this world. Put Jesus above all of that today and give Jesus your heart. If you're not sure if you're saved, if you're not sure if you've been born again, but today is the day that you want to become a follower of Jesus, I would invite you just simply to pray a prayer in this moment and tell God that you know you're a sinner and that you believe Jesus died on the cross and rose again for you, and that you want to accept the free gift of salvation, that you want to give Jesus your heart, that you want to become a follower of Jesus. You can do that in this moment. and you become a part of the family of God. And if today you are already a believer in Jesus, maybe today you realize that you've been sort of following people online, or you've been following a certain teacher, and you've been trusting what they're saying over the Word of God. Maybe today you need to passionately get re-involved in the Bible. You need to passionately get re-involved in being all about loving Jesus more than any man or any teacher or any woman on this planet. And just cautiously be aware. Maybe you need some more humility or some more grace in the way that you react to other people. But however God is speaking to you today, I want to encourage you to seal that in these moments before you're dismissed. Here's life lesson number 3, kind of said a different way. Religion changes our actions. Christianity, or maybe better said, Jesus, changes our hearts. Religion changes our actions, but Jesus changes our heart. There is no system, there is no mystic, there is no message from beyond that can change your heart. Only Jesus can change your heart. So give your heart to Jesus. How do I get rid of my murder? How do I get rid of my adultery? How do I get rid of my immorality? How do I get rid of all those horrible things? Jesus changes our hearts, so we give our hearts to him. So that's life lesson number 3. Beware of blind leaders. If you have any more questions about your own personal relationship with Jesus, you can go to our gospel tab at any time that explains the gospel or how to be saved. I would love to talk to you after the service. One of our prayer team members could be made available to talk with you if you need anything. And if this spoke to you in any way, if you have any questions, if you'd like to follow up with anything or have a prayer request for us, make sure you put that on your connection card, and don't forget to drop those off in the offering boxes in the back or downstairs on your way out. We're so glad that you came to worship with us this morning. We hope that this was an encouragement to you. We invite you back next time as we go on to life lesson number 4 next week. Don't forget on your way out to grab a whole bunch of extra cards. Give them out tonight. Have a great time with your neighbors, with your friends, and with your families. We'll see you next week. You are dismissed.
Hey, thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to take a moment to fill out your connection card. Let us know what you've heard from God today. If you have any questions or prayer requests, we'd love to get those. This is something that you can share on social media. If you'd like to do that, we'd be honored that you pass the word along. And if you want to catch up on other life lessons from this series, you can go to our YouTube channel or again to our website anytime to find out more. We've prayed over you, we've prayed over this message, and we hope that God has used it in your life to take you one step forward on your spiritual journey. Thanks for joining us during this time, and we hope you'll be back again soon. Have a great rest of your day.